my advice was, you have some great knowledge, but if you don't learn and be able to apply that with AI in some way, you're almost becoming unemployable. And I just said, I need to create a 3-hour CE course that is going to talk about appraisal issues to a real estate agent environment. I didn't tell it where to go. It started clicking on buttons, browsing, all kinds of things. It created all the instructor notes. It created the PowerPoint slides. It created all the marketing materials. It went in and filled out the entire submission package to submit it to the state. But then at the end, it went in and built a website on its own.
Episode 49 of Market Moves with Mark and Jeff, two uninteresting guys talking about interesting times. But with this episode, we've got a twist. We actually brought in an interesting person to talk about these interesting times. Jeff, I'm excited for this episode, diving a little deeper into artificial intelligence.
Well, what we don't have in intelligence or interest, we can at least augment with artificial intelligence and somebody who happens to be interesting. So I've been looking forward to this, Mark. I think as we welcome Roy Meyer in, excited to have you here, Roy, and excited to have you elevate the interest level of the podcast a little bit for us.
Great to be here, guys. It's going to be a great topic today, and appreciate you having me on.
Roy, I have known you, I bet it is 10 years now, a full decade somehow. And you know, I've known you for a really long time. I see in your resume that you actually have been a consultant since 1988. I think I was 10 at that point. So you've been doing this. I
appreciate you dating me.
Yeah, but I you have had an appraisal mastermind, which is how I came to know you, doing a lot of work in helping appraisers get business that was beyond mortgage work, using a lot of SEO, search engine optimization, and other tools out there. And then I was so interested to watch you for 7 years uproot your family and travel around the world and explore all sorts of things with school age kids in middle school and high school, I think. And you and I would catch up every 6 months or so on how you were doing. This happened to be during COVID also, so I think that added some extra fun to what you were doing. But you continued to run consulting practices and appraisal practice while you were traveling around. And I've seen you now, giving speeches overseas at colleges, over here at appraisal conferences and real estate professional conferences and beyond. And now just launched I don't know if it's VUVU or VUVU Global, which is something with your son, which has been a conversation you and I have had quite a bit about how we get our kids ready for all of this. And you have helped them really think outside the box. So I was just excited to have you on, Roy, and start talking a little bit about artificial intelligence with you and what you see out there.
Yeah, no, looking forward to the topic, Mark and Jeff. And there's so much misunderstanding in the AI space. What is it? Where is it going? The fear, not really having an understanding of what we have, how to leverage it. And, when it came out or I should say ChatGPT came out in November 2022, we had already been into AI for a couple of years using some other tools that we didn't really know were AI at the time. But when Chat came out in November 2022, we were actually doing a big event in the Philippines. And we were looking at that and just even that was like almost the prehistoric now, if we look back at that time of what AI could do. But almost instantly at that time said, okay, this is going to change the world. This is something that we need to dive into, that I'm going to fully need to understand. And so it's been a fun ride and a journey, and it's evolving so incredibly fast, this space. And it's to the point now where it's almost impossible to keep up with the new updates or the new releases or the new squirrels to chase every single day, in the AI space. But it's a great topic. It's something that's going to have a tremendous impact on our kids, on our younger generation. And that's been a real passion of ours as well, to help as much as we can prepare a younger generation for what this is as well. Because there's a lot of ignorance, even with our schools locally and our colleges here. And I think in the US, we've been really slow to adopt AI in a lot of respects, as opposed to many of the other countries that we've been to out there. So looking forward to the topic today.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that, Roy. I'm friends with a couple of school teachers who are kind of grappling with this reality that AI is out there. What does that mean? Should we allow students to be leveraging and utilizing it? Is it cheating if they're using it? And that sort of a thing. It's interesting to hear your perspective, having seen an international perspective on how this is impacting education. What are you seeing as far as differences out there between U.S. education versus international as it relates to the adoption of AI?
Yeah, obviously that's such a hot topic, right? On the education, both universities all the way down to grade schools on AI. Are we cheating if we're using AI? A lot of schools or a lot of colleges are banning AI. And to give you, for instance, we're recently in Japan, and now Japan is rapidly moving towards making AI literacy really a core part of their entire school education. Starting all the way down to kindergarten. If you look at, and that's across all grade levels. If you look at the UAE recently, I don't know if you saw the announcement, they partnered with OpenAI. And so in the UAE, they are providing the plus version of chat for every citizen in their country, which is part of what they're doing. So when you look at maybe a tradition or a model like Japan, where they're incorporating it as part of what they're doing, as part of their core curriculum, in even, like I said, down to the kindergarten level, and you look at the significant pushback in the US, where do you think those kids and youth are going to be in 10 or 12 years, where they have been focusing, learning, understanding, improving their critical skills, as opposed to where a lot of the kids in the US might be in 10 or 12 years, where there has been a lot less focus and a lot more pushback? I can't even really probably quantify the difference in the level of opportunity that we might have, as opposed to somebody who's getting introduced to it at the kindergarten level, so to speak. So there's a lot of different takes. Mine, a lot of people, Jeff, may not agree with. I look at things where I love it when I see youth and I see college students and I see high school kids, and they're using AI, because if we do it right, not to say that there's not cheating going on, but if we do it right, we can significantly accelerate our learning. We can accelerate our understanding far better than what we can do without AI. So it depends on how you're using it. But if we use it in the right way, boy, now we have an enhancer to really move us forward. So for instance, I'll give another example here. This goes back a few months ago. We had a good friend of mine, has a good friend of his, and his daughter had recently graduated from a college in Arizona. I won't mention which one, but she had graduated with a marketing degree. She had graduated nearly at the top of her class, and she was having a hard time finding employment. For her, I think she was, I don't know, she was $80,000 or $90,000 in debt, maybe a little bit more. And so he asked if we would at least talk to her about, give her some advice for looking for a job and what have not. So we had a conversation with a really sweet girl, and I said, well, tell me what you've learned, what you're specializing in, what you're excited about, what you want to do with your career. And she was telling me all the things she had learned and what she was going to do and what she can bring to the table. And then I said, well, I need to have a really candid conversation with you. First of all, what's your knowledge about AI? What do you know about AI? Well, not a whole lot. Well, do you have a ChatGPT account at least? No, but I'm going to be getting one. And then I showed her something where I'm like, everything you just shared with me, I have an AI bot that can do all of that better. And so I think we need to start adopting a little bit more, because it is displacing jobs, and especially the Gen Z generation. I just wrote a LinkedIn article about the Gen Z generation and them graduating now. They're kind of the ones kind of caught in the middle, right? They've already been in college. They're getting ready to graduate. What's going to happen? We just got this degree. Is it already, going to be taken over by AI? And so for her, my advice was, you have some great knowledge, but if you don't learn and be able to apply that with AI in some way, you're almost becoming unemployable in regard to that.
Boy.
So it's really it's something that's, I think, is an important topic that isn't touched on enough. And typically when most people see this, like, hey, AI is going to replace all of your jobs and those types of things, everybody thinks that's fear mongering. Oh, that's, just everybody's talking about this, it's never going to happen. It is happening. As a matter of fact, I just read an article this morning, even in Ireland, talking about the international part, where they're talking about the significant impact already on the college or the graduating college students there, that not most, but a good percentage of their jobs have already been replaced with AI. And so they're graduating with these degrees, little or no AI knowledge, and kind of like, now what, right? In regard to that. So I think, Jeff, back to your question though, there is a lot more adoption, I believe, in a lot of other countries as opposed to what we're doing here in the US. There's some adoption, but a lot less for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear, Roy. And I mean, I kind of feel like we could probably talk about this all day long. I mean, not exaggerating. As it touches education, as it touches, jobs and replacement of jobs, or even what an alternative, workforce and job description looks like, going forward. I think one of the things that I hear as a concern in integrating artificial intelligence in the education system is, how do we avoid kids losing the ability to think critically, to understand or to analyze like information, and not just have it be a crutch where they assume that whatever AI tells me is right, with the first iteration of what it gives me. And so, there's that challenge, but I hear exactly what you're saying. And even as a company, we look at it and say, man, we know that AI can really help leverage a lot of things, in terms of, technological solutions that we'd like to build and develop internally and that sort of thing. Somebody who's conversant with and kind of able to use AI as a productivity enhancer, it is immensely valuable, from an employability perspective. How do you think about, at least in the education and then preparing for jobs, helping kids understand what AI is and what it isn't, and avoid using it to be a crutch or something that just tells them the answer without them kind of critically thinking about or analyzing what the output might be, that they might be getting out of it?
Yeah, now, not to say that some probably don't use it as a crutch. I'm sure they do. They just want to take a shortcut and get the answer and move on. But once again, when we're leveraging AI, at least from a learning perspective, we can go in and ask it for an answer on any given topic, and it's usually pretty good. But also, if we go deeper, where we say, don't just give us the answer, can you also explain how you came about that answer? Can you now actually give me an exercise I can do where I can actually apply that and learn that even at a deeper level? So there's ways that we can take this where it's not just getting the answer. And to give you an example, we were homeschooling our kids as we were traveling. It's one thing to use AI to get the answer, but it's another thing to then look at our children's, how were they using AI? What was their critical thinking? What was their prompting? What were they thinking as they were going through the process in regard to that? So you're really important on the different ways that you can leverage it other than just getting the answer. And this really goes for almost anything within AI, where we need to learn to go a little bit deeper in regard to that. And interesting enough, Jeff, one of the things that I get asked a lot in regards to AI is, how do I get better at AI? How do I improve my skills with AI? And many times, people will go out and buy these, worthless prompt packages or thinking that's the answer. But generally, people are usually surprised when I tell them, if the number one thing that I believe you can do to improve your skills with AI, and I say this to our kids as well, and we have them do this, is improve your critical thinking skills. And so a lot of the books that I recommend, or where we're starting to learn more about AI, many times don't have anything to do with AI. They have to do with learning and improving our critical thinking. And so when we can master our critical thinking, we can learn to problem solve better. We can learn to go deeper. We can learn to ask better questions. We can learn to spot hallucinations a little bit better. That is where I believe is a great starting point to really improve your skills. And if I was a young person, those would be some of the books I would be reading, even now. And I wrote not only as a young person. And then the other thing, Jeff, you mentioned too, which is a great point, is that most people don't realize. Now, first of all, AI is a lot more than ChatGPT. That's one of the many different tools we use. But talking about ChatGPT, most don't realize that when you go in and you ask a question or you get feedback from like a ChatGPT, most people assume that that is the best answer it could give you, and that's all it knows about that topic. Mm-hmm. Very seldom, if ever, is that true. And most of the time, if you look at the output you're getting and you ask chat to go in and say, hey, can you do a self-analysis and rate your output on a scale of 1 to 100 as it relates to X, you're going to find that you're probably getting B output, or B answers. Now, everybody gets fascinated with, AI like it's a superpower, which it kind of is. But we look at the answers that it's giving us and say, wow, that's pretty good. That must be the best it can do. And that's hardly ever the case. So, you made a great point that everybody, both our youth, ourselves, the businesses, we need to learn to go deeper, make sure we're getting everything that it knows or when we can, and make sure we're getting the best that it knows. So it's a great tip for everybody. Go in many times and just say, hey, can you do a self-analysis of what you just gave me? Rate it on a scale of 1 to 100 in regards to how it applies to whatever it is you're working on.
Fascinating. Roy, I in San Francisco recently, and I think that trip emphasized the urgency in the view of those kind of on the front lines of building these language models that I don't think, it's in headlines everywhere, but it's sort of, eye roll and ad nauseum because it's every day that you see it and it's hard to believe. But, when you're driving through and every billboard is AI, it's just everything. It's like Silicon Valley has switched to all AI and not much of anything else. And, and there's a lot of dollars invested behind that. And I think that, there's a pretty firm belief that it's going this way. But I feel like that urgency and the inevitability seems to miss, typical American town Mark in Houston, Texas, even trying to stay on. And, I think this coincides or correlates to what you talked about here. Jeff and I were talking to a professor that is teaching computer science, has a business centered around artificial intelligence, is being recruited by another school in their computer science program. But their stance is that the first 2 years of the computer science degree path doesn't touch AI. And I think the plan in that is learn to do it the old fashioned way so that you'll be better informed when you use it, when you start to employ AI. And this person was saying, well, this is a deal breaker for me. Absolutely not. There is the inevitability of AI is everything and everywhere. And we've got education should start with it at this point. And it does feel to me that current legacy curriculum in elementary, middle, high school, college is essentially a Google or ChatGPT prompt in test format, right? It's like regurgitate what I told you to memorize. You'll forget it in a little bit. And the tests and the skills, they're just not set up yet for what AI can do. And so the easy thing is, well, let's just ban AI because our systems, and boy, that's backwards thinking.
Yeah, 100%, Mark, on that. And the other part that ties into that is, the level of understanding that somebody has about AI influences how things are going to move forward. Many times those people or those in elevated positions, so to speak, if they are not educated on what AI really is or what it can do or how it can help, then it's hard for them to really drive that engine forward for whatever role they're in and the people that they're trying to pull, because they're speaking from, their probably limited knowledge of AI and what it is. And so that gets, frustrating on a lot of levels because you have these decision makers that just have not invested the time to really understand it. So it's hard for them to make really good decisions because they're going from their level of understanding. And much to what you just spoke about, I would assume the person who is saying no, that you have to wait 2 years probably doesn't have a great level of understanding of fully what it is, fully how it can help. And in my opinion, boy, waiting 2 years at what we're doing right now, that is like 10 years falling behind, in that 2-year period, in regard to that. And even to that point, and tying back to the kids, Jeff and Mark, on this now, everybody has their own path, and certainly what we're doing and what we're doing with our kids, is not going to be a fit for everybody. Everybody decides what way they're going to go. But we did have this conversation with my oldest, with Cody, and he graduated at 16 when we were abroad. They were going to school full time, so there's no break. So he graduated a little bit early. But, he had the opportunity to go to college, when he turned 17. And we had this discussion because AI was coming out. Now, at this point, boy, AI was not even hardly a mention in colleges. There was not a whole lot going on, still, pretty limited. And so we had a discussion going, you know what? I truly believe that we are at the precipice of something that is going to change the world. And I think you have an opportunity to be so far ahead of your peers. We can go to college, but there's a very good chance we don't know where this is going to go. And you're going to spend 4 years learning something that's going to become irrelevant and might come out with X amount of debt. Or we could, if you want, we could look at what this is, take a gap year, fully dive into what is this AI? Is there an opportunity here? And have you be kind of a leader of your, Gen Z generations or the younger, or be able to take a much bigger, advance moving forward. And so he decided, you know what, I want to dive into this. And now he's 19. He probably understands AI more than 90% or more of the people in the US. The opportunities that he already has in front of him because of his understanding, his critical thinking, his diving into it. Even at 19, I can only imagine, I had to employ my company pretty quick before I'd lose him. But here, once again, his level of understanding is probably superior to a lot of college professors, if not most.
Boy,
in the way we think or the way we look at things. And so, with our youth, that's one of the same issues, right? That, boy, who are we learning from? How are they leveling, or how are they adopting AI? Do they even want to adopt AI? Are they anti-AI? And now I'm kind of stuck in going in this channel that I may not have any control over.
Boy, Roy, as you're talking about this, and this was one of the reasons that, in fact, this was when we first reached out to talk. This is a fascination for me, is kind of how to prepare ourselves. And I hope this conversation will kind of start in this macro level and start narrowing down to real estate specific here as we talk. But I record at home. I work from home these days, and my wife is downstairs with my 6-year-old. You can't hear it, but they're playing the Pokemon board game, and hearing you talk about what your son is doing, and it's really, really cool. And it's a big question on my mind, and a lot of people that are raising kids. So I've got a 6-year-old, it's my youngest, but I have a daughter entering her senior year in high school, and trying to figure out where to tell, my daughter is not a blaze her own trail type yet, right? And maybe she will be, maybe she won't be, maybe her personality type isn't that. But trying to point her in a direction that will be meaningful and, contributing to society and build a meaningful, income to support herself amidst all this change is so difficult. And Jeff, if you could pull up, I had sent this to you, Roy. We don't need to comment on it deeply. And it's really meant for kind of tech folks that are getting in. But there were a couple of sections that I thought were interesting, and a lot of words. But, I think AI is intimidating or kind of game ending to folks that are not of a fixed, or that are of a fixed mindset. For anyone, whether you're 83 or 6, if you're willing to learn new things, it's all in the infancy. This is a perfect time to start diving in and looking. But so Mark Andreessen is a guy that just runs a venture capital firm, but I think he started Netscape and a whole bunch of early tech things. And he was just trying to give some career advice. But under the skills is, be so good you can't ignore, but learn to break down problems to their fundamental elements. Roy, you spend a lot of time in workflows and how to dissect those. That requires this breakdown of of like to the fundamentals of what the process is or what we're doing. Thinking in limits, optimizing, systematic analysis. Develop taste is bolded, and it's bolded in my mind too. Developing taste, having good judgment, and applying how or figuring out how AI can be used in a useful way in the world seems to do that well. And down in the mindset is just to be curious, embrace chaos, which I feel like in a lot of ways we are now, right? We're in this change is chaotic, and you either just say I'm out. Hopefully I'm good with whatever happens and it treats me well, or embrace the chaos, stay curious, and kind of keep compounding your skills. So I'll try and find a way to share this in the show notes for any that might be interested. But I think this is around our conversation here, Roy. And I'm really curious in your son's example. I know you have a daughter that's taking a different track too, and that would be interesting to hear as well. But okay, I want to learn AI. I want to be involved in it. But what are some examples, like even with your son and what you guys have started, of how to apply some, like, where do I start to learn? It's such an open world.
So you mean like for your kids or for yourself, or how to help them get started?
Yeah, I think both. I mean, kid centered, but I think this certainly applies to our professional lives too.
Yeah, one thing, Mark, going back to what we talked about earlier, where, I believe one of the main keys to success with AI right now, at least for us, is learning how to have the conversation with it. Learning how to treat it almost like it's a person. And once again, I don't know if I shared this earlier, very seldom do I actually type. Actually, very seldom do I actually prompt. I'm usually talking back and forth, problem solving back and forth, treating whatever AI model I'm in almost like it is a person, getting a conversation back. And this leads to what you're saying, and this could actually apply to almost any situation, where if we go in and we learn how to have this conversation as a parent, let's say starting as a parent, where I could go into AI, let's say ChatGPT, for example, and just say, hey, Chat, I want to have a conversation today. I'm a parent, I'm getting up to speed on AI a little bit. I got to be honest. And this is how I actually talk to AI, by the way. Okay. I just kind of do a voice dump, and it takes it all and understands it. Let's just say, hey, AI or Chat, just want to have a quick conversation. I've got 2 young kids. I've got a daughter graduating high school. I'm not really sure what direction, how I can help her. We're in this new AI world. She maybe not be, that entrepreneurial, which is okay. But I'm really concerned about, I don't know where to start. How can I help her? What can we do? So I'd like to go through a quick session about, how I could, as a parent, best help her. Let's break this down. Ask me any clarifying questions about my situation. And I would love out of this, with this situation, by the end of it, to have some clarity on how I can help her the best as a parent in this AI evolving world. Typical conversation I might have with Chat. And now it's going to come back and say, hey, Roy, great. Here's a few questions. And what about this? And now we're just talking back and forth. It's almost like a therapist. I don't want to say, therapist. A lot of people might take offense to that in some manner. But the ideas that we can now get to help any situation we're in, or with our kids, and I've done this many times with our kids, or situations that our kids are facing, or how I could probably help them. And the output that I'm getting is, I can't even imagine the thousands of dollars I probably would have to pay for, some kind of an expert or what have not. So that's one really good exercise that you could do to start with. Even as a young adult, so a lot of the young people that we work with, we'll actually teach them that as well. Hey, let's go in, let's have a conversation. What are you passionate about? What do you enjoy doing? Let's work with AI and have this conversation about what are the opportunities around this passion that you have. It doesn't have to be in the AI space, but AI is really good at taking what you love and what you're interested in doing and saying, what's your daughter's name, Mark?
Madeline.
So going in, hey, Madeline, boy, you're passionate about this. This is what you really enjoy doing. And let's break down, what are all the opportunities out there for you? What would be a great possible career path? What are some ways that you could possibly get started moving towards this activity? What are some of the things that you could be doing? And then you could even ask AI or chat saying, hey, can you break this down into, can you give me a step-by-step plan how to help me achieve this goal? I'd really like to do this. How can I do that? And can you give me a timeline? And so when we learn, once again, to have that kind of conversation, the information that we can pull out of it is so incredibly helpful for us. And that ties into really almost any situation where, as long as we know what our X is, the problem that we have, our starting point, and then what our Y is, which is where we want to get to, we can go into chat and even just say, hey, you know what? I got to be honest with you, chat. I got no clue what I'm doing. I don't know what to ask you. I don't know what to do. I don't know what you can do. So what I need you to do is I need you to take the lead and help me get from X to Y. And you would be amazed now at almost any given situation or problem, what you can't solve, including helping to give our kids some kind of guidance. And that kind of probably went a little bit sideways, Mark, from your question, but I wanted to get that in because it's incredibly powerful when you learn and work on that kind of skill to have that kind of a conversation with AI.
Jeff, I just wanted to add, and a real key takeaway here is that I'm hearing Roy talk, and I don't do this, but I imagine it's an enormous paradigm shift talking to the language model and kind of I've heard a few people say that before, but I've certainly never put it into practice. And I just imagine that it's a companion through life's decisions much more than typing into, and getting 4 blue links back into Google type of thing. It's a real paradigm shift there, and something I'll take away from this.
Yeah, and even on that, Mark, it is a little bit of a hurdle, right? First of all, getting used to talking to it, but then also the mind shift of treating it like it is almost a person, and getting this, extracting this information out of it in that manner becomes really powerful to do that. So, it's not something that you can just flip on the switch and do. You got to get comfortable with it, and your wife or your kids, when I first started doing, they're kind of looking over like, who in the heck is Dad talking to? Over there and having this conversation with. But the other part of that, on the work environment is that we can talk 3 to 4 times quicker or faster than we can type. Mm-hmm. And so we become far more productive. As a matter of fact, our entire team, both local and our virtual assistants as well, are all required to use voice to text. We're just that much more productive in regards to what we're doing. So.
Well, that's the thing that really struck me too, Roy, as you're kind of describing this method or way of getting at the information, in the example of giving Mark's, daughter a career advice or whatever, is it really is this paradigm shift away from I type in a single kind of analog question into Google, I get some links that I can then go research. I mean, it's just the way that we interact with artificial intelligence is a lot different than the way that we are used to interacting with, a traditional or kind of a legacy internet search or query or whatever. And it really was, well, here's some links that you can go research, and we're shifting that into, AI, whether it's chat or one of the other models, has already ingested and kind of synthesized that information from those links that we would otherwise be getting. And now it's us, adapting to, okay, so how do I actually prompt and ask this thing to give me stuff? And it's more conversational, it's more interactive than, one single question and some links I go look up, and then, maybe a follow-up question, or I click more links or whatever. I'm curious, as you describe that process, Roy, is it voice to text in a computer? Is it voice to text in a mobile device? Does it even matter at this point, like what the interface and hardware is that you're using?
So like most of the models now have a microphone, that you can actually click on, and then it'll take voice to text. ChatGPT does, Claude does, some of the other ones do as well. We use one called Voice In. It's a Google Chrome extension. And so it's just a simple, and by the way, it's not just for LLMs. It works in Google Docs, Gmail, Word. It works in thousands of applications. Once again, dating myself a little bit, probably a lot of people listening to this remember the Dragon software way back when. It was horrible, but we tried to get that to work, and we're far past that, obviously. But yeah, we use something called Voice In. There's another one called Whisper that works on the different the models as well. But So to answer your question in regard to that, yes. So that's what we use.
Well, really appreciate the kind of in the weeds perspective on what works, what helps, for the input and the interaction. I find myself, even just learning as I listen to you talk about like how you interact. And I think, it kind of goes back to Mark's question a little bit of where do I start? Well, I mean, ultimately it starts somewhere and then see where it leads you, but understanding, what the dynamics can look like with this mode of interaction versus, what we've historically been used to with, Google or just internet searches previously, really, really helps. I've heard you reference chat probably as often as others, Claude a little bit. How do you think about the different models, Roy? And do you find that there are some that you lean on for certain tools or topics and then others that you'll move to others for? They're advancing very quickly. Do you see them converging or do you see them maybe diverging in terms of what they're good at and what they're not?
Yeah, so lots of different AI models, apps, LLMs. It's impossible to keep up to date with all of them. Now I try to spend just on my own. I try to spend anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a day just learning and testing, trying to keep up, and I can't even remotely keep up with everything that's happening. Now, ChatGPT is still by far, or OpenAI is still by far has the biggest market share in the AI space. I think the stats I read from a couple of days ago is globally, I think they have like 78% share, of usage, which is significant compared to all the other models, right? But what we do find are the ones that we use the most. Obviously, we use chat. That's one of our go-tos. Claude is also one of our favorites. There's certain things that different models do better. We have found Claude many times to be better in the coding department. We have found Claude to be better many times when we're creating content or social copy, so to speak. It tends to come across a little bit more human or real. Chat, I think, has caught up here recently with that. Perplexity is obviously our go-to search engine. I can't even remember last time that we used Google for anything, but Perplexity we use for that. So there's going to be different models that just help you. Chat is just going to be one of the value stack. Just for your audience here, I think would bring value. Notebook LM is an incredibly powerful model that's owned by Google, and it's free. Incredible resource where you can just dump data in it and have these conversations with your data. So, something like that. We're also moving in now, you probably have heard about agents. Everybody's talking about agents right now. What is an agent? What's an automation? What's the difference? A lot of confusion in regard to that. But we're getting to the point here within the next 6-12 months, doing some of the basics in ChatGPT, like most people are doing, that's going to be kindergarten level, because we are greatly advancing into this agent model where you have these models who can think and take actions and do things on their own. And so, one of the big ones out there, maybe you have or haven't heard of Manus, MANUS, is a great agent type model. And to give you an example, Jeff, it would be great to show it to you, but to give an example of what we did with that, among many things, is we went in and we created a 3-hour CE course. And within here, all I did was put in a pretty simple prompt into Manus. And I just said, I need to create a 3-hour CE course that is going to talk about appraisal issues to a real estate agent environment. And it's got to be approved with the Bureau of Real Estate in California. Pretty much left it at that. Now, what this agent model did was first thing it did was create a to-do list. Okay, in order to do this, I'm going to need to do all of these things for Roy in order to create this course. But what it did on its own, it ran for about, 2-3 hours. I didn't touch another thing. It did all the research. It started researching sites on its own. I didn't tell it where to go. It started clicking on buttons, browsing, all kinds of things. First, it did all the research. Then it created the course. It created the interactive part of the course. It created all the instructor notes. It created the PowerPoint slides. It created all the marketing materials. It went in and filled out the entire submission package to submit it to the state.
Wow.
It created, there's a lot of things I'm even missing out here. If I showed it to you, I think you'd be impressed on it. But then at the end, it wouldn't even build our website on its own. All from me giving it a simple prompt, it did all these things on its own. So we're getting to the point now where we're really just going to have to go in and tell something what to do, and it's going to do it for us for the most part. And another example would be like within Claude. One of the things that I love that you can do within Claude is I could go into a regular prompt area because we have connected it via Zapier to some other components, but I could go into my Claude and say, hey, could you put an invoice together for $650, send that over to John Adams for the appraisal on 123 Main Street, and just go into my account, create that invoice, and then could you go ahead and send that over to John? And then also, if you wouldn't mind scheduling a Zoom meeting for him for next week so we could review that, that would be great. And make sure that it goes on my calendar as well. All I did was speak that into Claude. It went into my PayPal. It created the invoice. It went into my invoice or into my to my email. It wrote the email, included the payment link. It sent it off to him for payment. It went into my Zoom. It set up a Zoom meeting, and it put it on my calendar. So this is where we're moving as we go forward. And there's a lot more applications in regard to that. But just, there's a lot of models out there. To go back to your question, Chat, Claude, Perplexity, Notebook LM, Manus is a fantastic model. And there's a host of others. But the thing with AI is, and Mark, you and I have talked about this, is there's so many squirrels to chase, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh my God, squirrel. And I'm guilty of it every day as well. Where as a business or on a personal level, we really need to dial things in and say, okay, what do I need to get done? Where is the biggest need in my business? And then look at what model is going to help me achieve my current need. Because if we focus on all of the squirrels and all of the things it can do, we're never going to get anything done. So we need to look inward. What's the biggest need of our business? What's the biggest need for me personally? Okay, what model is going to help me achieve and move the needle forward here so I can get some real action? I can move that needle forward in my business or in my personal life, and then just evolve from there. So that's usually what I recommend everybody do to start, is just look at what your needs are and just focus on that, out of the gate.
It might be funny to think about that as a hurdle, but I think you're hitting it right on the nail on the head, Roy. I mean, there's so much possibility, and it's kind of at the heart of Mark's question of what can be done. Where do I start? It's so easy to think of 5 or 10 or maybe 100 different, squirrels to chase at once. And I think that almost becomes a bit of a barrier. It's almost overwhelming of there's so many different models, so many different things I could try and test. I don't even know where to start. And so it's almost easier not to than to at least get down the path. I think, certainly your advice is born out of, a lot of experience of, acknowledge that there are a lot of, possibilities and options, but then hone and focus on the ones that, that matter the most. And for me, it seems that just the experience of operating or using these is how you learn how to use them and what they do well and what they don't. And maybe a quick example I have is, this fall, I'm going to be with somebody else presenting at one of the appraisal conferences, really about best practices within AI. And so, the partner in the collaboration, I could tell, put a prompt into an AI model somewhere. It created some slides and he forwarded those on. And the thing I noticed was that it looked really good, and there wasn't necessarily inaccurate content, but it wasn't very focused at all on what it is, like what the actual topic at hand was. In your example, Roy, of putting the prompt in and then having it create this whole system, from content to application to marketing material to website, did you find that had to be an iterative process, or with this particular model and in this agentic scenario, did it kind of land the first time in what you were expecting?
Yeah, that was in regards to Manus, I wanted to see what it could do, where it could think on its own. So I gave it limited information.
Okay.
And I was extremely impressed at what it was able to critically think on its own and do without me prompting. So that was a test. in regards to answering your question, Jeff, in regards to, is it an iterative process? We're always going to be doing that, right? We're always going to be looking at what did we get? Okay, we need to maybe redo that a little bit to get a better output. One thing I recommend doing is when you are coming up with a prompt or you're writing a prompt, and this applies to myself, even our team, is we usually would have AI or ChatGPT look at this prompt and say, can you rewrite this prompt, so that, or can you even do the self-analysis of this prompt in regard to how effective it's going to be for what we're trying to do? Or it could be, Jeff, we are creating a presentation. Here is our audience. This is what I'm trying to do. Hey, could you go ahead and create this prompt for me to help us get the best possible output? And so what we do, and especially with our virtual team, they're not allowed to write their own prompts. And even myself, I generally, if I'm going to prompt, will ask AI to help me to evaluate the prompt I have or to create the prompt for me, because you're going to find it's going to give you a much better prompt than what you try to do on your own in regard to that. So, and then the other thing too is that ties into that, Jeff, is if we get some information, or let's say it may be hallucinated, which is getting less and less now. It's not doing that as near as much as what it used to do. But let's say we get some bad information. And what happens many times is that we look at it, oh, we got bad information. Oh, you know what? This model's no good. AI is no good. It's just not there yet. And we need to shift that mindset into, wait a second, what could I have done better so that this wouldn't have happened? So when those types of things happen and you get maybe not a great answer, or maybe a little bit of hallucination because maybe that was wrong, this is where learning to have that conversation where now you stop and you go in and you say, hey, Claude, or hey, Chat, I know this is wrong. What could I have done better so that this will not happen again in the future? What could I have asked you so this won't happen again moving forward? And when we take those times as a learning opportunity, we learn how to work with it better. We learn how to prompt better. We learn how to understand how it works better. And so those are really opportunities I think a lot of people miss. Don't just dismiss maybe a not a great output. Take that as an opportunity to learn, moving forward. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, Jeff, but
you bet.
Roy, I might put that entire segment there in a bucket called "Help Me, Help Me," where it's asking the language model to help myself. Really, fascinating, and I think a really key. Those of us in a fixed mindset that are hoping for the outcome that this can't make a difference in our worlds will take the wrong information as a quick reason to abort and then tell the whole world this is why I don't use it. And I think at times I could fall into that category for sure. And especially as someone in like financial services, where wrong information is a real deal killer. I find myself probably excusing myself from a little bit of use because of that wrong information. And instead, I really like the idea and the concept of just, look, this is just an iteration. That wrong information is going to be part of the process, but don't stop there.
Yeah, and that happens on the human side as well. When we're working with humans or even on this side, that's just a natural part of it. And you mentioned on the financial side, it was interesting, Jeff and Mark. So I was asked to do to put together an event in Vegas for a pretty high level group of CEOs and those in the financial sector. And so I had some things that was going to put together. And so I got on a call with all of them and we were talking about the potential event. And the person who had introduced them to me, we were excited about putting something together. We had an hour call. Now, that entire hour call was them talking at me, telling me why they couldn't do this. Mm-hmm. I never even had 5 minutes to share what I was even going to do. So, this is that mindset of what people's level of understanding, especially when it comes to security of our data, right? Yeah. That's usually the first thing that people will throw out. Well, that's not secure. Well, How do you know it's not secure?
Yeah.
Have you researched? Because there are ways to secure this data. Same thing, I have a credit card fraud protection company that we're working with. It's one of our biggest clients. And as an example, when they came to us to do some consulting with them, what do I know about credit card fraud protection? Other than my card seems to get hacked every 6 months. Not a whole lot, but I do know how to get answers out of AI. And what we were able to do with this company was incredible, because we knew how to dig in and get answers and do things for them, even though I wasn't an expert in that field. Now, in regards to that, coming back to this level of pushback, they have their main developer on board, and we got introduced to him, or I got introduced to him, and the same thing, where we were going to adopt or infiltrate, or not infiltrate, but adopt AI throughout the company. And we had an hour call. 59 minutes was this person telling me why this would never work. And I didn't even share one thing about what I was going to do or how I was going to help. So we have this, like you were saying, I think, Mark or Jeff, this people who are instantly going to turn it off without even wanting to take the time to understand what it is or how it could help them. Unfortunately, for them.
I really hope this podcast, in at least some of the episodes and what we do here is trying to help shape mindsets to help people to grow and be curious, and especially in these interesting times. And I think your messages throughout the beginning of this here are really, really hit home. This is an oversimplification, I think, in just one dimension of sort of some of the mastermind stuff that I've known you for a decade for, but really also inherent in you picking up your family and leaving. I was really inspired by that. Just thinking outside the box and new experiences while keeping a business running. But I've always kind of thought of some of that it goes back to Tim Ferriss's very initial book of the 4-hour work week. And it's not to not do very much work or at all, but there's a work-life balance component to a lot of this. And a lot of AI can bring this. And there are just a lot of, the simple calculator, I think, is a good example of life improvement from a technological tool. Like, we don't have to use the abacus and whatever to solve complex problems or just do complex math. We can get to the deeper problem at hand by short stepping the calculator. And I think AI is that, on several orders of magnitude beyond, obviously. But as these tools, and as you consult with business owners, entrepreneurs, and the like, talk to me a little bit about work-life balance and the quest towards it. Most of us don't have much of it, in where artificial intelligence might be able to help us in this regard.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And, that was one of those things, Mark and Jeff, I think we left in October, November 2017. And it was one of those things where, boy, there has to be more to life than working the hours that we work, especially in the real estate industry in regard to that. And so we made a conscious shift in our business to be able to travel with our kids full time, do that. And how do you make this work-life balance? Now, I wish we had AI back in 2017. It would have made the shift a whole lot easier for us. So how can you help, if you're looking for a better work-life balance, a better lifestyle, even more work, whatever the case might be, what's another way that you could use AI to potentially help you with that? Well, same thing. We could go into AI, have another conversation. There's other things, but this is another example. And we could give it those metrics going, okay, AI, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. This is the kind of hours I'm working. Here is my vision of what I would like to do. I'd like to be working 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week, so I have more time with my family. I would like to be working 20 or 30 hours. I would like to be able to travel more or do all of these other things, more as well. I would like to be able to earn X amount of dollars and work less hours. And I would like to be able to do that within the next 90, 180 next year. And when you can go in and have this conversation, give them your metrics, what it is you're trying to achieve, and say, okay, ask me any clarifying questions once again. But now, hey, AI, I need you to help me craft a plan. I need you to help me put a plan together so that I can actually achieve this and you can hold me accountable moving forward. You know what the metrics are now, whether it's time or money. And now you know what the variables are about me and my business. You would be amazed, Jeff and Mark, at how good it is at giving you a structured advice and plan to achieve what those goals are. And so, it's another opportunity. If we learn how to use AI as a strategic partner, it becomes incredibly valuable. And even a little bit off topic, because I know we're going a little bit long here, tying into that, one of the things that I recommend for companies, and we do all the time too, is we go in and we create an AI board of advisors. And so when we have this AI board of advisors, which are these incredible experts, and they have names, they have avatars, they have families, they have a history, they have a college education, they have a work history, they have a certain experience. And when they're talking to each other, and I can go in and have this conversation with them, and they can help drive our company forward, it's amazing what we can do. But this comes back in again to learning to have this conversation. And just back to your original question, Mark, like, how do we get a better work-life balance? Well, let's go in and figure it out. Let's give it our metrics, and let's let it help us brainstorm together and get that plan together. One of the biggest things one of the biggest reasons most people don't move forward, whether individually, personally, professionally, their business, is because they don't have clarity on what to do. They don't have clarity on their plan. And now there's no reason that you can't have clarity, because you have this incredible thought partner to help you give you that clarity to achieve your goals.
Well, it's really, really fascinating to just think about how this works, how it can apply, how it can help you formulate a plan, hold you accountable, serve as a board of advisors. I mean, all of these things are just things that you have to change your paradigm around. But as you do, I mean, geez, it certainly makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, Roy, as we drill down, a little bit deeper, are you seeing any, maybe just quick examples of ways that leveraging the artificial intelligence tools are helping appraisers, or in the appraisal process specifically? We may not have to go super deep on that, but I'm just curious, so say I have this prompt and I want to, readjust my work-life balance. I'm just wondering if you have any examples or are seeing anything where AI tools are helping with productivity, or spend less time doing, appraisal work specifically to maybe help achieve that balance that people are seeking.
So you mean actually like within the appraisal process or the report process of creating or putting reports together, or?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of appraisers now are using it to help improve their narratives, where you can take your narrative and go in, and I think probably on the whole, a lot of lenders are starting to see longer addendums and wondering, boy, what happened to some of these appraisers? They got incredibly smart, overnight, because their addendums are looking really well, me included. So, that's a really a long conversation that we could go down here. But narrative, the report writing, analyzing our data, absolutely being able to pull in data, analyze that. There's a lot of tools that we can do that. One thing I'd like to touch on that just a little bit is you'll see a lot of people mentioning never use AI for data analysis. It's you can't replicate the results. You can't trust it. You don't know where it came from. And I've seen a lot of people mention that and just avoid it at all costs. Now, this comes back to a level of understanding about AI. Well, what if you could have AI tell you how it came up with those results? What if you could have AI give you the output so that you could replicate that data? Because you could go in and say, hey, don't just analyze this data. I also need you to tell me how you came up with your analysis. Then I also need you to break that down so that I could credibly reproduce those results. And I need you to put it into a way that I can submit it into my work file. So there's lots of different ways that we can learn how to leverage AI. And to your question again, Jeff, there's so many ways. If we had more time, creating custom GPTs, to do different things. We have a GPT that can just do regression. We have a GPT that can just do paired sales. We have a GPT that just can look at our narratives. We have a GPT that is our FHA appraisal assistant that can look at any of our FHA analysis that we've done, or report. So, I'd probably just encourage, that segment or appraisers to be looking, what are the things that I do repetitively over and over and over as part of my process? Because if it's something that you're doing repetitively, it is probably something that can be automated, or you could create a custom GPT around it to help you with that particular item. But boy, I'd love to do a whole segment on how we could help with that.
Well, we're loving the conversation as it's going, Roy, and we're already an hour in. I'm sure that there are a million different things that could be done. And I'm curious, what agentic solutions could be, and assembling reports. I mean, there are a million things we could talk on. So I think we should definitely plan on maybe a part 2 where we dive a little deeper in the weeds of kind of, the appraisal production and output, productivity, tools and opportunities that exist, because I have no doubt that, we could spend a whole lot of time, on that as well. But for me, I think it helps at a minimum in this conversation to just kind of whet the appetite of, oh, hey, yeah, I guess I could do a whole lot of these things that I know need to be done in the process, that I know should be documented in the work file, so that if I ever have to reproduce it, I can, and can have credible, not just results, but ability to explain, what those results were and how we got at them. So I think we can earmark, maybe a continuance of this topic would be a lot of fun to, to dive a lot deeper in and set up to where we could share, have you share a screen and show, some of the stuff that has been done, already. Of course, that's, taking for granted that you'd be willing to come back and talk with us again, but we would welcome that.
Yeah, no, would love to do that. There'd be, we do a screen share, be a lot of great things that we would share with everybody. And even on the, on the appraisal side, and we're in such a new world on where we're going, with AI, the headwinds we're having, the moving from the forms, on. And so there's a lot of things we're facing right now moving forward. So I think there's never been a greater time where appraisers are starting to understand that they do need to focus a little bit on diversifying, and kind of getting out of the complete lender. We've talked about it for many, many, many years. But I think that is an important thing to really consider right now. And for appraisers, even on that level, once they understand how AI could help them drive that business, it is easier than it has ever been before if they understand how to leverage AI to help them do that. And that's a whole cool segment that I could share some really incredible things as well, even on growing their business as well. So
awesome.
Roy, you have been on a few other appraisal podcasts. Shout out to the Appraiser Coach. And I was just at Appraisal Foundation meetings a few weeks ago, and ethics. Well, just trying to wrap our arms around artificial intelligence, and kind of an appraiser specific question. I wonder you've thought a bit about this in ethical considerations with regards to artificial intelligence in appraisal, as it relates to USPAP, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, that kind of guides how we conduct our business. Any thoughts, challenges that are coming up in that sort of thing? I think appraisal specifically, but in and around industry similar.
Yeah, boy, there's a lot of conversation in regard to that. How is AI being used? What needs to be disclosed? I don't know, if there's any guidance coming out on that anytime soon, Mark, because I have been privy to some of those kind of meetings. For me, the way that we're using AI on the appraisal side, it still takes our intuition. It still takes our thought process. Now, can I go in and brainstorm with AI to really help me improve my thinking, to help me improve how I analyze data, to maybe look at things that maybe I hadn't thought about on my own? Absolutely, I can. Now, is that AI doing the appraisal for me? No, it's enhancing my ability to do my job. Same thing. Let's say you're praising a multi-million-dollar home that's got this incredibly, $200,000 kitchen. That's or not even maybe that expensive, but this incredible kitchen. And we're pretty qualified, or we're qualified appraisers. We've been doing this many times, but I can tell you, I'll shoot a picture of that kitchen. I'm going to feed that photo into a protected AI that we use. the analysis it can do and the features and the things that it can pick out from that image that I might have missed that I can put into my report, pretty powerful. Now, do I need to disclose, hey, you know, by the way, I used AI to analyze the picture of the kitchen to help me with my analysis to put into the report? You know, I hope that we don't get to that level where it's like, that's, you know, something simple that we did in regard to that. So I think, Mark, this also goes back to tying this back into the level of understanding about AI, what it is, how it's helping us, what it really is. I hope that the thought leaders have a really good understanding, or at least getting a good understanding of what it truly is and how it can help us. And because maybe potentially not a full understanding, we get limited on what we're able to do or what we have to disclose or whatever the case might be. So that's my fear, is that whatever the upper levels might be that are making these decisions, how fully do they understand what it is and how it can help us?
Boy, Roy, I've shared the fear, and I think it goes back to the mentality that we talked about, of maybe like a fixed mindset that might lead us to, or in this case, I think from a regulator perspective, a risk averse mindset that excuses change as something that they have to deal with one way or another. And I worry about this. In Texas, for quite a while, appraisers were the only people in the world that could not do evaluations by law, you know, and like, what a silly, like the people with the most skill set. And there's a whole lot of reasons that make that complicated, and appraisers will twist themselves up in why they can't. But darn it, do we need to figure out how we can? And I really worry that, you know, super deep disclosure being required, some work file requirement that is impossible to keep in terms of work file, you know, reproduction, or on and on. You know, I really worry that we could twist ourselves into a way where we are saying you can't really use it compliantly. And then that just opens the door yet again for someone else to start performing our services that don't have the restrictions that our industry places on itself.
100%, Mark, in regard to that. That's a fear as well. You know, because we're not playing by the same rules, that brings in so much opportunity to take advantage of these types of tools that can do some amazing things. So I agree with you on that.
Well, Roy, this has been a blast and really a mind expanding hour here with you. Appreciate that. You know, I'm going to take away from this that these chat bots are going to become my friend and my companion that I talk to. So I don't know if my wife's going to be happy with that result or not, Roy, but I think we are going to get that. And I think the aspect of these things helping us think strategically, or being a partner in thinking strategically, is an area that I haven't put a lot of thought into yet. So I really appreciate that. And, you know, as we're closing out what we hope is the first of many episodes with Roy Meyer talking about AI, I just kind of wanted to give the mic to you and any last thoughts for us considering AI in this new world.
Yeah, you know, like we mentioned earlier, you know, boy, we could go on for hours, right, on this. So this is really to maybe pique everybody's interest a little bit, that there's more to AI than maybe what you might realize. And when we learn to, one, have this conversation with it, when we learn to treat it almost like a person, when we learn to use it as a strategic partner, as you mentioned, as a thought enhancer to enhance our abilities, as a brainstorming partner, this is where the power really comes in to help us both personally and professionally as well. So hopefully today piqued everybody's interest. I'm looking forward to coming back on. We can get into some real examples and maybe share a screen. But hopefully everybody got some good takeaways today and maybe looks at it a little bit differently than what they were before.
Well, we really appreciate it, Roy. You've certainly been very generous with your time and just knowledge sharing. You know, it's obvious that you've spent a whole lot of time and investment personally to just understand deeply the nuances of what artificial intelligence is, the different applications, you know, where and when and how it can apply, and this mindset shift around how to use it in the way that it shines and works best is just immensely valuable. So you really grateful to you. We'll absolutely be taking you up. You are on the record, by the way, of saying that you'll come back. So we're we're going to take you up on that, whether you like it or not. But look forward to round 2, because I think we can really, get some practical hands-on, examples and experience that, this has been mind-opening for me. Round 2 will be even that much more so as you start to see some of the practical realities of what can be done, how to do it, and how to do things in ways that we just haven't thought about doing yet. You've articulated a lot of those at this point, and I look forward to, seeing it in practice. Will be a lot of fun.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Well, take care, Roy. We will talk soon.
All right. Bye for now.